Hey, Mr. Garage here, and today we're going to be covering a whole bunch of maintenance items on your 1800 watt to 2300 watt generator. Now, at face value, that sounds like I'm going to cover like all these different generators, all these different brands, and the reality is I am. But I don't have to have all those generators here because what you guys don't know is there's really only a couple manufacturers that make the internal guts of the generating assembly. That's like the piston, the head, the generator portion, the actual inverter. And what they do is they private label it for all these different companies who then put it in their own suitcase, make their own packaging, make it look nice, their own colors, and then they put their own control panel and stuff on them. And that's how you get the different features. Like some may have digital output or digital display, some may have Bluetooth, some may have say 12 volt output. So there are some differences. But when you actually get down to it, the physical guts, the internal structure is the same freaking thing, which is why so many of these comparison videos are ridiculous, because the guys doing the comparison videos didn't even realize they're actually comparing the same internal structure generator, and they're putting it head to head saying this one killed this one. In reality, it didn't at all. It's just literally the same generator. So anyways, yeah, we're going to be covering oil change today. I'm also going to recommend a magnetic dipstick for any of these small generators with no filter, which is pretty much all of them. We're going to be covering spark plugs and what I recommend there, because it's a really hard crossover. Most people won't find this crossover on the general internet to get a good spark plug for these small generators. Be covering valve clearance jobs. So I'm actually going to show you how to valve clearance these Ducar series generators. And then I'm going to put in an hour meter. Now mine has an hour meter on it, but since I have an hour meter here, I'm going to show you guys how to add one on to your own generator, your own Ducar variant that may not have an hour meter on it. So yeah, so let's go over here. I'm going to show you guys how to easily spot, say, a Ducar generator and see if your guys' actually is that internal structure made by Ducar. And then, yeah, all this stuff will apply to you maintenance-wise. So let's go take a look and get on this. All right, so some easy ways to tell that you have a Ducar generator. You notice the exhaust port. The exhaust port is going to be just to the right of center, and it's going to be kind of up high in the chassis. It's not going to be down low or centered. The Ducar ones are going to be up here, so that's an easy external way to tell if you got a Ducar generator and if all the stuff we're going to talk about is going to apply. Now, moving on to the internal structure, this becomes really easy to spot. I mean, besides, say, the green plastic on the Ryobi, if I stripped all this away, this is all going to look exactly the same on the Ducar variants. So you've got a cast valve cover gasket. You're going to have the same carburetor assembly. You're going to have this identical intake boot. You're going to see this air filter with this large silver screw. All of this stuff in the exact place. You're going to notice your oil dipstick and fill tube is going to have a aluminum, not plastic. It's going to be cast aluminum coming up. Those are all telltale signs this is a Ducar built generator. Now, what manufacturers do, as I talked about before, they do their own control panel. They might have some, specific things that are cool just to them, and that may make it worth your penny to buy. Like Ryobi's got a killer Bluetooth panel, which is really great, and you can shut off the generator via Bluetooth. A lot of other ones just simply don't have that function. They might have, say, 12 volt output, which is handy because you can charge or jump start a car battery, but they all have their little different control panels. But the guts, like I said, those are the same. So those are the telltale signs that this is the generator that you have a Ducar built generator. And then again, all these maintenance items will apply to you. So let's get on those. All right, so let's tackle spark plugs first. And the different variants of this generator, like if you buy, say, a Pulsar versus a Ryobi versus a Craftsman or something like that, they may have slightly different heat range spark plugs in them depending on what the actual company that bought the generator placed inside their case spec'd. So in this Ryobi one, I had a extremely generic torch plug, an E6 RTC. That 6 in the E6 means that this is a 6 heat range plug. Now, I mentioned earlier it's kind of a hard crossover, and here's why. So this isn't just found on the internet. You got to actually look at all the specifications of the plug to do a proper crossover. And in a past life, I've worked with spark plugs, so I know this really well. But in anything that I run with a gasoline engine, it's going to get an iridium plug. That's not a sales pitch in any way, shape, or form. There is a reason every major manufacturer on the planet of automobiles has switched to iridium plugs or fine wire electrode plugs. And the first reason is they last virtually forever. They'll probably last as long as your generator. They're extremely hard to foul. And even if you manage to foul it or wet foul it or get oil all over it, it will still throw a spark. And the reason for that, I'm hoping this will focus, is that little tiny had some fuzz in there. Little tiny fine wire electrode for a tip. Now, you don't need to gap this. You don't do anything to this. This is literally plug and play. All you have to do to put it in is you're going to take your old spark plug out. And when you put your new one in, you're going to get it down in the hole, hand tight. And then because this is a gasketed plug, you can see the gasket right here, them spinning with my thumb. You're going to get it down in there hand tight, and then you're just going to turn it 1/2 of a turn around, and that's all you do to tighten this down. Then go ahead and put some dielectric grease on the cap and put your spark plug boot over the top of it. That's it for the install. Now, going back to heat range, like I said, this series of plug from Denso is not going to cross over, like, I guess visually for most people, they won't understand it, won't cross over to a 6 heat range. The way Denso works is a 6 heat range is equivalent to an IWF 20 or a 20 heat range in Denso. So that's what a 6 is. If your factory plug was a 5, it would cross over to a 16 in an IWF. Now, if your factory plug said E7 RTC, for example, you go to an IWF 22, and I'll put all those parts in the links to the video description. But that's all you have to do to seriously upgrade your plug from one of these junk nickel tip torch plugs that foul very, very easily. I can't stand these things. I always throw them away right away. But that will be what you want to buy for your generator. So get one of these plugs in the proper heat range for your Ducar series generator. Install it and move on with life. Never have to worry about your spark plug again. It's as simple as that. So that's it for plugs. Next topic. All right, so let's talk about your dipstick. Yeah, that's a little bit uncomfortable. But what I'm talking about is your oil dipstick. This little guy right down in here. For any small engine like this one that does not have an actual oil filter or a way to filter oil in any way, shape, or form, the least you can do for it is to get a magnetic dipstick. Now, these little guys have a neomagnet in the tip right here on this, kind of pressed into the metal. Now, what that does is as the engine runs, and these are splash lubricated, which means oil just basically every time the crank turns around and the rod comes down, it actually picks up oil and it splashes it all over the internals. What that does is while that's circulating and splashing, any metal particulates or steel that can actually be attracted to this will be attracted to it. Now, after you run this for a full cycle, you're going to take this dipstick out and you're going to have this whole tip completely coated in black, and you're going to have to clean it off. And that's just junk that's in the oil that would normally just slowly be damaging your engine. So you've probably seen it in a previous video. If you saw my Predator generator video, you actually see me pull it out and show you guys how nasty it was. But just take my word for it. You guys definitely want one of these. I've got a link to the video description of this exact model that'll fit these Ryobi generators, and it will help you increase the service life of your generator. They're not that expensive, cheap insurance, just real easy to add filtration onto it. So, all right, so let's talk about the next topic, and I'll be right back. All right, so let's talk about oil changes on these small little Ducar internal generators like this one. So I've got my oil fill door that I took off. You can see it. It had 2 Phillips screws that held it in place. Most of them are kind of like this, but they'll have that little drain in the bottom. And all we have to do is we're going to take out our dipstick, the factory dipstick, or your magnetic one if you purchased one of those. So we're going to take that out, and it might drip a little bit or might overflow a little bit. And then we are going to tilt this generator up onto its side. So you notice I've got it sitting close to the edge of the table because I have this clear container, and I'm going to tilt it up to the side so I can pour the oil from there directly into the container. So here we go. Simple as that. That's how we drain our oil out of these series generators. Now, I'm doing it in a clear container so I can see any particulates or any crap that may be in the oil, and I can kind of just gauge the health of the engine by the way the oil looks, and I can shine light through it. I can kind of see what's in the oil, if anything. So that's just my preference. But I know all you can see is the side of the generator right now, but this is the entire drain process. We just let it drain out. I drain my generators hot, so this engine's completely hot when I went to drain it. That's why it ran out like water. The faster it runs out, the more crap that goes with it. And so that's why I recommend doing it hot. Just my 2 cents on that. So yeah, let's roll on into filling the oil back into the generator. All right, so filling oil on small engines. You've probably seen me use one of these before. This is a Mighty Vac fluid extractor. You can see the part number there. Check my video descriptions for links to this guy. But for small engines, this is a giant syringe, and this makes doing oil very, very easy. I'm going to stick the tip of this big old syringe into my oil that I'm going to be changing. or extracting and then filling. And then I'm just going to suck it up in this big old syringe. Just takes a second to fill her up. And this provides for a super clean change. Now you can see the oil, brand new oil in here. All I have to do is then stick it down in the oil fill hole and fill the engine up. And I like doing this because I can actually see down into the engine as I fill it. So once I get it all the way full, I can see right at the point when it's going to start to run out. And I can stop without making a mess. I can usually do an oil fill without spilling a drop. Usually. So we're just kind of injecting a little bit more. Wasn't sure how much. I can actually start to see the oil down in there. So we're just about there. Alright, just doing little bits now. So let's see where we end up. There she goes. Oil came, sucked just a little bit out. Oil came right up to the very tip. And I didn't spill a single drop. That's why I love using a fluid extractor for doing this. Okay, so for this topic, let's talk about adding an hour meter. Now, this is the version I use, this little hard line. This is what I buy for most all my stuff, quads, dirt bikes, small generators, anything 1 or 2 cylinders. This little guy is awesome because it's not only an hour meter, it's got a tachometer with it. Now, installation of this thing is like silly easy. All you're going to do is you're going to run a wire that it comes with it through this hole like that. You're going to put it down, kind of tip first, back down in so you form a loop. And once you have your loop, you pull it tight so you can kind of see it loop there. That's it. That's the cable installation. Now you just take the other end of your cable, you're going to wrap it around your spark plug wire, and the instructions will tell you the number of turns. You can wrap it around the spark plug wire, and that will then register with this thing what the engine RPM is, and also give you an hour meter that counts up. And then this guy, you can use screws, double-sided tape, whatever you want. Mount it to the body of the generator somewhere. Mount it inside the engine case, wherever you want it. You can mount it, and then you can keep track of your maintenance. Now, I'm lucky enough, Ryobi did a killer control panel on this. They have an hour meter and everything built into this, not a tack, but an hour meter built into it. So I don't need something like this. But likely, there's a whole ton of variants out there that you may have that probably don't have an hour meter. So again, you can buy one of these, and simple job. So that's it for the hour meter, and we'll move on. All right, so let's talk about fuel stabilizer. One of the most important aspects of owning a small engine is to keep your fuel up and good so the carburetors don't gum up. Now, the trick is you don't add it to the gas tank on the piece of equipment. You add it to your fuel container itself. So you may have several fuel containers in your garage. Always add STA-BIL to it. And that way the gas is good to go right off the bat. Now these STA-BIL bottles are genius. You can see how I'm squeezing it here. And it just adds the right amount of stabilizer right up into that top little portion. Then you can dump that directly in the gas tank. Now 1 ounce, and it's labeled, it's graduated on that little lid piece thing. 1 ounce treats 2.5 gallons. So that's a 5-gallon container. So I would do it twice to treat that gas tank. Now the reason you do it in your gas tank is so that any equipment that you put fuel in is going to have stabilizer in it. And if you run said equipment, then that stabilizer is going to be in the carburetor where you want it. A lot of people make the mistake, they just grab STA-BIL, they dump it in the gas tank on their piece of equipment. Well, that didn't do anything to help the carburetor out. So make sure you put it in the equipment, or at least run the equipment after you put STA-BIL in the gas tank so that it gets in the carb. So that's, again, that is so critical. So you're not on a forum somewhere whining about how your generator or your piece of equipment won't start because you left it sit for a year. Stabilizer is going to help you out tremendously. It's not the cure-all, but it will help you out tremendously. Buy it, check my video links, and next topic. Okay, so let's talk about setting valve clearance on your little Ryobi generator or any of the Ducar variants, Pulsar, Westinghouse. There's a ton of these little ones. So if your valve cover looks cast like this, you've got cast rocker arms, this is a 79cc engine, chances are you're going to find a Ducar stamp on your generator so you know what you're working with. So first thing we need to do, we're going to pull out our spark plug, take the cap off to set our valve clearance, and we are going to drop in our screwdriver down in the spark plug hole. All right. Now, as I rotate the crankshaft, I'm doing that with a 19 millimeter, just right on the end of this little generator. You're going to see the valves move, and you're going to see the screwdriver going up and down as the piston goes up and down. This doesn't hurt anything, by the way, to do this. That's going to indicate kind of where the piston is. Now, what we have to find out is we got to be on a compression stroke. So I'm going to stick my thumb over the spark plug hole, and I'm going to rotate it until I feel compression, basically air pushing my thumb outwards. So that takes a minute. Let's find that stroke. Thumb doesn't have a good seal. That thumb, I guess. I need to. There we go. Now I got air pushing on my thumb. Now that I know I'm on a compression stroke, I want this screwdriver to come out. Whoop, went too far. I want this screwdriver to come out as far as it will go. And that indicates I'm at top dead center on the engine. So the piston is up as far as it will go on a compression stroke. All right, so to set the valve clearance, you're going to need a feeler gauge set. You're going to need an 8 millimeter wrench and just a small set of needle nose pliers. Now on this brand new engine, where they had it from the factory, was 0.10 millimeters on both the intake and the exhaust. This is your intake valve. This is your exhaust valve. All right, so the factory recommendations, it took a lot of digging to find this because Ryobi doesn't call this out. I had to find alternate manuals from other manufacturers, and I finally found Westinghouse gave the specifications for this engine because they're really good on their manuals. So I give kudos to Westinghouse because they actually list service stuff like this that you as a tech need to know. So the intake on this little 79cc should be 0.06 to 0.10. So if we notice, we're at the maximum spec on the intake clearance for the intake valve. That's good because this is a brand new engine, and as the engine breaks in and that valve hits the head, the valve clearance is going to tighten up over time. So that's good. We're at the max on that for the intake on a brand new engine. The exhaust was also 0.10, so they just basically used the same feeler gauge set at the factory, but its range is 0.08 to 0.12. So that's where that's going to be. I'm not going to change these. I want these to be exactly as they are because those are good specifications to let this engine break in. Then in about 300 hours, I would go in and definitely check your valve clearance. Changing the valve clearance, again, simple process. So right now I already know my feeler gauge 0.10 is going to fit. So we're going to slide this between the tappet head, basically the top of the valve, and this little tappet right here. I'm going to kind of just set my feeler gauge right there. And if I was setting this, how I would do it, I would take my 8 millimeter, put it over this nut, okay? Now I'm going to loosen this. All right? Now we can do a few things. If I can do this with the camera on. If I tighten this too much, I can't move my feeler gauge. It gets stuck. If I loosen it, then the feeler gauge gets really floppy. That's how you loosen and tighten your valve clearance. So I'm going to tighten this, and actually I usually do this step by hand. I just want to tighten this until I feel a bit of resistance on this feeler gauge. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. That's the factory setting. Now I'm going to grab onto the square head of this tappet with this needle nose pliers. I'm going to squeeze hard, and I'm not going to let that tappet move. And I'm going to take my wrench and I'm going to go back and tighten that down. Okay. Then I'm going to recheck to make sure my feeler gauge can still go underneath between the valve head and this tappet. That's it. That's how you set your valve clearance. Now you do it for your intake and you do it for your exhaust. Now after 300 hours, knowing the valve specifications that's provided for this particular engine, I would probably aim for the same spec. 0.10 is just a good spec for this little motor, so it'll be just fine. So these will be a lot tighter after the engine's run. Just set them back to 0.10 every 300 hours. Valve clearance is important. I see so many generator posts where people's generators are no longer running, or they won't start, or there's something going on with their generator. It just runs like crap. Usually comes down, if it's got a lot of hours on it, it comes down to simply valve clearance. Now, not having, or basically having too tight a valve clearance, so if you ran this, say, for 600 hours, 1,000 hours, and your valve clearance gets too tight, you're going to end up burning a valve. Basically, the valve can't close all the way. There's a little bit of an air leakage or exhaust leakage, and that will end up burning your valve and ruining your valve seat, ruining the head, ruining the valve. So valve clearance is very important. Do that. Like Ryobi says, every 300 hours, and you'll probably get a really long service life out of this little engine. While you have the valve cover off, yeah, I'm back. I want to give you one more little tip. If you take this off, your valve cover off, when your generator is new, which I recommend, this is what's going to happen. Your gasket's going to come off in one piece. Now, this is a little tip that I give a lot of engine builders and people working on engines. Coat this brand new gasket in a super light coating of grease. Now, I use a calcium sulfonate marine grease. It's just a Lucas marine grease, but I just do a slight little coating on here, coating the whole gasket surface. This will seal very nicely. There's no oil pressure or anything under this rocker arm assembly, hardly any oil in there. But when you tighten this guy back down, when 300 hours comes or whatever your service interval ends up being, you're going to take this guy off and your gasket is not going to be stuck to your cylinder head. And you can reuse this gasket over and over and over and it will stay sealed. So that is a good little tip for you guys. Hope that helps you out. Last little bit, I'll quit talking on valve clearance. All right, so the last topic of this video, let's talk about your air filter. You take out this Phillips screw, and I've already done that to make it a little bit easier for sake of this video. And take the cover off, and you have a foam air filter in here. Now, how I clean foam air filters: fill a bowl of hot water, put a little bit of Dawn dish detergent in it, and put your filter in it, and rinse it until it's clean. You may have to rinse it with some fresh water, but get everything out of the foam air filter. Now, these do have a coating of light oil on them. What I would usually do, old school wise, is just take some 75-90 gear oil if you have it and just kind of spread it evenly on the filter. Well, gear oil is nasty. You also have an alternative. Maxima makes Fab 1 spray-on air filter oil, which makes it a lot easier to coat evenly. You don't need a lot of this stuff. You're just going to kind of spray it over the filter assembly and let it soak in before you reinstall it. Simple as that, but that's how easy your air filter cleaning is on these little generators. Alright, so that's it for the video. I really appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe. All the products and items I use in my videos are in the link. So if you buy from those links, it does help me make a little coin so I can keep doing what I'm doing. I will catch you guys later.